The most difficult stage in a man's life is finding a good wife, yes. Making money is not a problem to a man, no. A man can do anything to survive and he will succeed. Men don't get problem in that, no. But you see, finding a good wife, hey, that is the most difficult.
Hello, my people. There's two tests you need to test for any African woman you want to marry. If you're a man, you want to get married, and these two tests are very, very important. Apart from there's other stuff you will do, but this is the most important ones you have to do. Before you even propose. Before because if you fail to do this test, and maybe you try to do it later in the relationship, your name might become sorry. You know what I mean? Maybe because in a relationship you're already having, children are involved. So for you to disentangle yourself, it becomes a big problem. And number one test of this is how she handles money. It's very, very important that you run this test about how she handles money. Because we know that in African paradigm of marriage, it's men that do the heavy lifting. We do all the heavy lifting. So you have to throw money at her initial time and see how she handle it. Just pretend to play a fool that you don't argue, you don't know, you don't ask her how she use this money. Just throw that money, and maybe after 3 months, you start to ask her to be accountable. How do you use this money? And she doesn't handle this money well. I mean, this is a red flag, because what's happening is that along the line, if you go ahead and get married to her, and maybe you travel and left her with money, your children is gonna suffer because she's not gonna use that money on your children, and she might not even use it on herself. You know what I mean? Because she doesn't know how to handle money. So it's very important. And number two test you're gonna run is if she's a habitual liar, if she's not trustworthy. You know what I mean? If it's somebody that has this pattern of lying or dishonest. You know what I mean? And one thing I understand is that if the first one, if she failed the first one, definitely she will fail the second one. If she doesn't know how to handle money, it's likely that she's gonna be a liar. She's gonna tell you bullshit. I want you to believe. You know what I mean? Believe in this bullshit, and if you don't believe in this bullshit, she gets angry. And now you find yourself thinking that you are the one at fault just because you demand honesty. You know what I mean? So these two tests is very important, and I know why I put the first one and the other one, the second one. It's very, very important to run this test, because this will determine if the relationship is gonna progress. You know what I mean? Because it's gonna be bad if you find out at the later time. Maybe 2, 3, 4 years along the line. And that's why relationships in Africa now is it doesn't last for 2 years. Because you are dealing with people, especially modern women in Africa, that have been influenced by social media, by their friends. The modern generation now, they're not like the old generation. You know what I mean? Not like the old. I'm not saying that the old generation, all of them are very, very nice. It's not. But I'm saying like this new generation of things, they don't care. They feel like they don't care, and it's not like the same thing our forefathers did with the old generation. It still also expect us to do. We do all the heavy lifting. So before you do all the heavy lifting, you have to run this test, and don't listen to anyone that will get emotional about. Maybe your relative is getting emotional when you find out that she is not good in money, managing money, and she lies to you. Don't listen to your your relatives in Africa that will say, "Oh, this is why do you want to leave this relationship?" Don't listen to them, because some of them might get emotional. Maybe they like the girl, but even if she's so beautiful, because sometimes if she's beautiful and she doesn't have a good character, you cannot eat beauty. But the good character is gonna make you live long. Except if you want to join your ancestors soon. And you go and marry somebody that mishandles money. You wanna drain you and drain your pocket. And even drain your mental health. And when those stuff is drained, you know what I mean? You can get stroke, or you can die early. That's why men in Africa, they don't last long. average life expectancy in Africa, in most of African countries, is not above 45 years. And I don't want you to feel that to discover this late. That's why we are passing this information for you to know how to make a step. And for you to do this test, you have to pretend like you're full in the initial time. It's very important that you pretend, because you just want to know how. You just think like because they don't think like men. They don't know until when you start holding them accountable. And once you discover that this is it, this is red flag. You shouldn't go ahead to do anything. Peace.